Well, the US state of Michigan is one of a handful of battleground states that will determine who will be the next American president. The swing state has been won by Donald Trump in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020. And now the Democrats are hoping Kamala Harris's late injection into the race will give them the boost they need to win in November. Stephanie March from Foreign Correspondent has just returned from Michigan. Here's part of tonight's story.
Just wanted to ask, what is the Lord of the Rings favourite character doing here at this event?
I'm campaigning for Kamala Harris for president.
Why?
I'm here because if I'm lucky to live to be an old man and have grandchildren, they're going to sit on my knee and I'm going to tell them about this moment when America elected its first woman president.
And Steph joins us now in the studio. Hello, Stephanie.
Good morning.
In that clip we just watched, we saw that the Democrats have really attracted some star power to their campaign and volunteers have been signing up. Is this all making a difference to the Harris campaign?
There's definitely a bubble of enthusiasm for Kamala Harris on the ground in Michigan. But as the Lord of the Rings actor Sean Astin told me there, he said, these volunteers, they don't need me to be energised. They're already energised. So within Democrat circles, there's definitely a renewed optimism and energy. But the key is they then have to translate that to getting out more voters. They have to translate that energy into door knocking, making phone calls, convincing those undecided and unmotivated voters to go to the polls. And what we're seeing at the moment is that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are neck and neck in the Michigan polls and the surrounding swing states. And these volunteers have been at it now for 2 months. So as one volunteer said to me, it's not a marathon, it's a sprint now. And they've got a lot of work to do to get there.
And you've been out on the hustings with Democrat and Republican volunteers as they go door to door. What issues are voters raising there?
Yeah, it's quite fascinating actually being a bit of a fly on the wall to some of those often kind of awkward conversations between people from different political persuasions. But there was a few things that kept coming up, and one was that a lot of voters didn't really feel like they knew who Kamala Harris was or what she stands for. She's been trying to get her message out a lot more, doing interviews. She did a big Oprah interview, doing sports podcasts, but she's got one of the shortest runs to election day of any presidential candidate in history, so there's a lot of work to do. And the other thing that kept coming up is people, when we were door knocking with both Republicans and Democrats, saying that they have a problem with Donald Trump's personality or character, but interestingly some of them were considering voting for him and leaning towards voting for him anyway. And that sort of comes to the third issue, which is the economy and inflation, which is something that a Democrat congresswoman told us is a real vulnerability for their party. Even if people don't like Donald Trump, but they can't afford the basic necessities, then that might be what sways them on election day.
And in light of these issues that people have concerns with Donald Trump's personality, how are Republican volunteers sort of pitching him to voters?
Well, they're sticking to those strengths that he has, that during, Donald Trump's presidency, inflation was lower than it is now. And that's a really key and really tangible thing that Republicans are trying to sell. The other one's immigration. Michigan's on the Canadian border. It couldn't be further away from Mexico and the southern border, but it is an issue that people have there. They say that there's a rise in crime from some immigrants. It's backed up by the Sheriff's Department. So that's a really easy selling point for them. And just also this message of, that right now, as we've been seeing in your reports all morning, the world is in chaos and the world wasn't in chaos when Donald Trump was president. And I think if we, think about what's going to happen over the next 5 weeks, that could become even a bigger issue for the Democrats particularly.
And in Michigan's capital, Detroit, there is a really big African-American population. Is that an advantage for Kamala Harris?
It should be. So traditionally, the African-American community tend to vote Democrat. Nearly 90% of the African-American community, according to exit polls, voted for Joe Biden. But Donald Trump has asked his leaders in Michigan to really go after that African-American vote. And we've seen a poll where 1 in 4 young African-American men actually support Donald Trump now. And one of his selling points on that is his criminal indictments and his criminal conviction. He says that he's been unfairly treated by the justice system, and that's an experience that many African-American people and men feel that they've had too. So the view is that if there's someone in the White House who's experienced this, they'll be better placed to deal with it.
And there's also a large Arab American community in Michigan. I know that you went to Dearborn, which is the centre of that community, and people there are not happy with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris over America's support of Israel in the war on Gaza. Could their votes make a difference in Michigan too?
Yeah, they could. So Dearborn's the first Arab-majority city in America, and back in 2020, about 60% of Arab Americans voted for Joe Biden, but obviously since the last year and the war in Gaza, support for the Biden-Harris administration has just tanked in that community. And we spent time with one of the anti-war groups that's popped up, and they've spent months trying to convince Kamala Harris to back an arms embargo for Israel. She's refused, and now they've come out and said that they're not going to endorse Kamala Harris. And it might seem like a very small group of people in the enormous country that is America, but just looking at the numbers, Joe Biden won Michigan by 154,000 votes. There are an estimated 270,000 Arab Americans of voting age in Michigan. So it is something that could make a difference. And as I said, what we're seeing happening in the world today, and probably will continue over coming weeks, could exacerbate this issue for voters who are motivated on that point towards the election day.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens. Stephanie March, thanks for the chat.
Thanks, Ruby.
And you can watch Foreign Correspondent Kamala's Battleground. It's on tonight at 8 o'clock p.m. on ABC TV and, of course, on ABC iView too.